As a person that's been in that place, how has that been like for you when it comes to now expressing your thoughts into something that's creative?
I've always naturally been a creative. It's definitely influenced me because I think that it helped me build a stronger emotional intelligence when it came to the characters that I would write. All of these micro emotions that a person expresses on camera, there is an entire life story behind those that are creating those interactions. When it comes to a person that acts a little bit more reserved, there is an entire lifetime of lore that a person has that has created that external expression.
Yeah.
And that's really what therapy has taught me, is that everybody has a story, including your characters. You can have all of these different archetypes to the characters that you have. That's really how I think that therapy influenced my character writing and my screenwriting as a whole, is that it's taught me that even like a one-line character that you have for just a blip of a scene, there's an entire story that is untold.
All right, guys, welcome back to another Hidden Record episode. Today, we do have another special guest. As always, every other guest that comes on, they're very special in their own way. But this one in particular, this is...
Hi, my name is Will Metlock. Do I look at the camera when I'm introducing myself? Or
whichever you want to look
stare
at.
Your beautiful face?
Whichever you want. You
Okay, I really like this one because it's giving me the most attention. This one is kind of a little far back. It's a little...
Hey, now,
it's like
I will give that thing an attention. You give
it
that
seems
one
a
an
little socially
attention.
awkward. Come on, friend. I don't know.
Yes, we're going to talk to our cameras like that.
Yeah, exactly. Hi, camera number one. See, I don't know. It's my favorite. It's like picking a kid, you know?
Yes, exactly. And you know, Summer, hey, Summer, if you're watching this, we love you. Summer says, she said, if you want to look really good in front of the camera, you want to make eye contact to the camera and make love to it. Yeah.
Do I really?
She said that.
I don't know if this camera could take me.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
All right. So in this podcast episode, guys, we're going to be diving into a lot of things. The first one, there's a lot. The first thing that I want you to stay in tune for is the fact that William is having a movie coming out really soon. Seriously, that takes a lot of hard work to get a movie started from the beginning all the way to the end. And that title of the movie is, what is it?
It's called Smoke Breaks. It's not like a full feature film per se in the traditional sense, but it's an 11-minute, 24-second little short film that I kind of created about it. The whole process has probably taken about 2.5 years or so, and we just got our first rough cut like maybe about a week ago or so. And,
well, there you go, you guys. That's what you're gonna be. That's what you're gonna be listening out for. The process of making your short film, because that is a huge endeavor to take on.
Yeah.
So congratulations to you for making that from beginning to the end. To how he started and then got all the way to this point in the year 2024 of July 8th. We're not reaching Skynet yet because the AI is still not that smart. Anyways, stay tuned for that. If you like this content that I've been putting out, don't forget to hit and like and subscribe on this YouTube channel. And also, where can people find you?
Okay, so I've got 2 Instagrams, okay? One is at swagmasterboxhut5000. I know that is a mouthful. If you have like a visual, like if you can physically put it in, I'll just like send you what it looks like.
Yeah.
That's like the one that you and I have been DMing off of, really. And then for our film Instagram for Smoke Breaks, it's just Smoke Breaks Film on Instagram, where you'll be receiving like all kinds of VTS. We had a really fantastic photographer named Hannah Day Gregory. She's a local photographer here.
You did great, Hannah.
She shot and edited like 700 photos.
Damn.
And it's like literally just everything that has been taking place over the filming process to the VTS. I mean, to literally just the physical film shoot itself. Like, she's really done it all. I think she took over 3,000 photos and edited 3,000 photos and cut it down to 700.
Shout out to you, Hannah. Shout
Hannah
out to you.
Gregory.
Hey, come on, dude.
I didn't know if it was my piece of glass. I'm sorry.
Good.
I didn't want to be rude.
Thank you so much for editing a lot of the content for his short film. We love you.
No, she's like absolutely incredible, really.
Okay, with that being said, let the thunder roll. Doom, doom. It's a rainy night. Once upon a time, it was a stormy night.
Even though it's like bright and sunny out in Fort
Hey
Walton
now,
Beach.
don't write the picture. Don't write the picture. It was fine. You know what? Fine. It was a sunny day with a temperature that's over 100 degrees. It's so hot that you can cook a lot on the road. But
You could like
anyways,
steam a big old like bag of broccoli just by standing outside.
I know. I feel like I'm being cooked into like a dumpling or a tofu out the outside.
Yeah.
It's that hot. But anyways,
That just shows like that I'm like white and you're Asian, because I was like, oh my god, it's like steaming broccoli, and you're like, yeah, I feel like a dumpling, like, or I feel like a thing of tofu, and I'm like, okay, like, I'm cut.
I know
I'm pasty.
it's very hard to breathe in that environment. But anyways, we're trying to paint a picture here. Sunny day, 105 degrees, whatever. In this big rock that we call Earth. If we zoom in just a little bit in the United States, but if you just zoom in a little bit more in that tiny handle right there, Florida. And if you zoom in a little bit more, if you go across the coast of Destin, actually we're in Fort Walton, there is a person named William. And we're now about to dive into the beginnings of William Metlock. Tell us your origin story.
Jeez.
Go for
Okay,
it.
so what is my origin story? Okay, so I was born in a small town called Slida, Louisiana. That was like where the hospital was. But then my mom was like, okay, we're gonna carry you over to this like small town called Career, Mississippi.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, it's like really teeny tiny. Like I know Mississippians that don't even know what Career is. Like it was crazy. And I lived there until I was about 6 years old. Hurricane Katrina hit, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, so, and then my mom had family out there, so, and my dad still kept his job in Louisiana, so they were like, you know what, we're gonna do like a long distance marriage kind of thing.
Okay.
You have my dad was like, you have sick parents, I'll make it out like once a month and everything.
Okay.
And so I lived in South Florida, specifically the Boca Raton area, for about 12 years.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, from like ages 6 to 18.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came out here when I just graduated high school, just because I kind of felt this like really weird energy with Pensacola that I just kind of wanted to explore a little bit more, and I got accepted into UWF.
Oh, wow,
and
okay.
I've been here for the past like 7 years or so. I got my undergrad in psychology here, and then I eventually got my master's in social work, where I'm now sort of like an unlicensed, I'm a therapist kind of actively working towards licensure.
What drove you to, okay, first of all, I love psychology. I actually have books on it. The thing that I love about psychology is finding out or understanding more about the interpersonal relationship between multiple people and understanding how one responds to another based on the behavior and how they talk. All of that is just so interesting. So what drew you to that?
So it was like really interesting because I first initially went to school for marine biology because I was like, oh, I watched Finding Nemo as a child and I want to save the fish.
Wait. Please tell me you've seen Free Willy.
I have.
Is that
I mean, it's not like my favorite movie. It was Nemo that really was like, oh my god, this is my shit. And,
wow.
Yeah, it was Nemo, and I was like, oh my god. And there was this like one specific, like I was looking through like all the different career fields that you could go into, and there was this like job called an aquarist where you could basically go in and like take care of fish tanks and everything. Turns out that's like 1% of all marine biology majors, and the rest either go into the Navy or do research. And I was like, ew. So I then was like, oh my god, what do I want to do? I want to do makeup and costuming. Why? Because like James Charles, before he was canceled, was like the only thing that I would watch, and I was like, I want to be like a beauty boy.
Okay.
And my mom was like, you still have to go to school. So I then switched my degree to technical theater, and I like broke up. I went through like literally a Britney in 2007 moment, and I like shaved half my head, broke up with a long distance boyfriend, and like literally became an entirely different person. And then was like, I need therapy because oh my god, I'm not good. The thing is I can't afford therapy because I am a broke college student. So then I was like, well, what can I do? Oh, I can fix myself.
Okay.
And I went into psychology, and because the other thing is I was like, okay, I'm really good at being a creative, but I'm also really good at talking to people. What is something that I can do where I talk to people that doesn't involve me selling cars or other things, like without going into sales. And I was like, okay, I really like the medical field, but I hate blood and guts. And again, I really love talking with people and being just a person that people can lean on and everything. So then I was like, okay, this is something that I can do that can also give me health insurance. And so because that was like a big thing was my mom was like, you can go to school for anything, but you just have to be able to pay your bills at the end of the day. And I was like, all right, cool. So that was kind of what drew me towards therapy. And I was kind of like, all right, well then I can have therapy sort of be, my bread and butter and to a degree. And then, I can really try and figure out this creative thing as I kind of go along. And that was really sort of the thing was I was like, I need something that I kind of that I like and that won't make me question all of my life's decisions while also being sort of able to put while also being able to pay my rent. And it just kind of felt like a natural fit because I just really naturally loved learning about people. I loved learning about all of the things in the DSM-5 and I read like all of the big psychologists like Milgram, Piliavin, all the Stanford prison experiment, like all of those different things. I became just so infatuated with it. And that's really where I kind of came to be where I am today. And now I'm like an active working mental health clinician.
And we end credits there. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Actually, what therapy? I know you said that you with therapy it provides you a platform to understand other people. What has therapy taught you about yourself when it comes to learning how to navigate through your emotions and your thoughts, especially when it comes to being open about who you really are and accepting who you are is perfectly the best version of yourself because not everyone is always gonna see it that way.
So like the biggest thing that therapy really taught me about myself and not just like in regards to other people and everything was it really taught me the power of having an open ear. I mean, honestly, like everybody says, oh my God, everybody needs a therapist and everything. And I do believe that to a certain extent. What I do believe is that everybody needs a person that they can feel listened to, including myself, and that was really the thing. And I also think that it really taught that therapy isn't necessarily the only coping mechanism that one could probably isn't necessarily the only coping mechanism that an individual can have in their tool belt, but it's also sometimes not even the best one. There is such thing as therapy fatigue, and because part of the recommended thing that people do when you are going through therapy school is that you have your own therapist. And there is such thing as therapy fatigue, where you legitimately have talked through all of your baggage. And there comes a point where you start to kind of go through cycles, of your own emotional processing. And it kind of taught me that. And so then that sort of lended itself. I was like, okay, well, like therapy just naturally isn't benefiting me anymore in this point in my life. It really helped me discover some other avenues in which I can kind of express myself. And that was where I started finding really like, my love for writing, as we're probably going to discuss later, my joy for MMA and, like UFC fighting and everything. Yeah. It's a whole thing. Yeah. And, that's what it really taught me was that like therapy isn't necessarily the only coping skill that another individual has, but it's also not the best one for every given circumstance. I think everybody, whenever you're going through any kind of mental health struggle, they say, oh my God, go to therapy. That's not
necessarily the best answer for their situation. Might not be the Band-Aid that would immediately solve what they're going through.
I mean, like sometimes, and like this sounds like a little like controversial and everything, but sometimes you just need to like literally cry it out with a friend until like 3 a.m. and then you're good, And I obviously recommend like therapy to a bunch of different people.
Okay.
But like it's one of those things where I'm like, it is such a great resource, but it's not the only one. And that was the thing that it taught about me, because that was the original thought that I had in my head was like, I need to go to therapy. When in reality, and I did to an extent, but then it came to a point where I was like, okay, I don't need therapy. I need a hobby. Like, I need to have friends. I need to, and have these different things in my life. I can't just be solely reliant on my therapist all the time.
Yeah, just one person is not enough to make your whole life whole.
Yeah.
I mean, I still think that served a value, because if that didn't happen, you would not have gotten to that place where you actually realized those were just as important as having someone to talk to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As a person that's been in that place, how has that been like for you when it comes to now expressing your thoughts into something that's creative?
So, I've always naturally been a creative. I wouldn't necessarily it's definitely influenced me because I think that it helped me build a stronger emotional intelligence when it came to the characters that I would write. And because when it comes to writing characters for things like for something that is to appear on a screen, all of these micro emotions that a person expresses on camera, there is an entire life story behind those that are creating those interactions. When it comes to a person that acts a little bit more reserved, there is an entire lifetime of lore that a person has that has kind of created that external expression.
Yeah.
And that's really what therapy has taught me, is that everybody has a story, including your characters. It's like you can have all of these different archetypes to the characters that you have, but what's the story behind that? Even for I've seen little 3-minute short films and everything. What is the true novel length life story that this character has for this 3-minute clip? And that is the thing that I think that's really how I think that therapy influenced my character writing and my screenwriting as a whole, is that it's taught me that even a one-line character that you have for just a blip of a scene, there's an entire story that is untold.
I'll do you one better. The movie with Wall-E?
Yes.
Even without dialogue, if you just understand how they create a story with just what's unfolding in front of you, that's a story enough of its own.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, you're given such a context with everything that, Wall-E as a character has. I mean, it was really funny because I was talking with a friend, this is so weird, because a week ago I was straight up talking to a friend, and he was saying that his favorite movie of all time was Wall-E, because it was just this beautiful grand love story in this dystopian world, and he just loved the kind of dichotomy of it. And it was really interesting how this teeny, how this ultimately a garbage can of a a recycling bin of this little robot guy, I mean, was able to portray such emotion. But it's you could just tell that there is so much experience that this teeny little robot
so
has.
Cute.
And it's through these brief little micro expressions.
Even when he moved eyes, even when he just changed to a tiny box, it's exactly like what you said. It's not only just through words, but through the body language of every character and the micro expressions that they portray on screen. Yeah, guys, we could just talk about this the entire episode, days. But I have a question. In therapy, though, I know there are some people where they have to go through this certain phase where they have to regulate certain things in terms of what is being said and what's not being said. Yeah. With therapy, in some variation of therapy, some will allow you to just forget about filtering the specific thoughts that you want to express. So with the creative opportunities that you've been given, how has it been for you personally as a person? How has it been for you to finally just express everything without some sense of judgment from other people and including yourself? It takes a while to accept that what you're thinking to yourself is also just as important.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately when it comes to all of that, it's just been completely life-changing, because I think that for it's been an incredibly therapeutic process, this filmmaking process in of itself. I didn't realize how much it would be. I've found myself in a lot of ways that I didn't even think that I would. When I was first kind of creating, even as a kid, I was almost embarrassed with the art that I would create. And it was my parents were proud of me to an extent, but it felt very personal, and I was this is just my thing. And I felt very secretive about the writing that I would do growing up and everything. And this is sort of the first time that I'm actually kind of showcasing my artwork, you know, in a sense. I think the only other time was really the last time that you and I communicated, which was at CCT when I had like sort of that little art exhibit where I was selling my artwork.
That.
But other than that, and I think there was like one other like competition I had won in like 6th grade or something. But between all of that, this has really been the most vulnerable, like, creative process that I've ever been through, because I'm not only showcasing people all of these things, but it's through the creative meetings that I would have with the creative team over at Calliope Films in understanding all of these little things that have kind of influenced this film and this filmmaking process.
Right.
A big thing that I had kind of had to deal with was like just the imposter syndrome of it all, which was like such an interesting thing.
real.
Well, everybody talks about it, but it's like everybody talks about it, but they don't understand fully what it feels like.
Yeah.
It's like there comes a point where it's like you genuinely just. I mean, it really took me having to accept the things that were kind of being given to me in a lot of ways, because a lot of this happened just by complete accident, you know. And I'm just incredibly lucky at the fact that people have been responding to this creative project for so long, you know, because it takes a lot of working gears and it takes a lot of these different things, and it can having topics like this, you know, that are kind of discussed in the film. For some people, it's not super digestible in an understandable way because it's a very niche topic. And so that process in of itself of explaining them, I've had to not only dig deep for these other people to kind of help them understand the message that I'm trying to portray, but it's also helped me dig deeper into myself as to really understand why am I telling this story in the first place.
Well, that's a beautiful answer. Seriously, there's actually... We are about to unpack. Are you guys ready? Put on your seatbelt. Put on your seatbelt. This is about to be a roller coaster. Now, but be prepared because I'm about to hit you with hard-hitting questions like the way to do with the moderators. All right. Now, I want you to channel the presidential candidate energy. All right. Okay, Mr. President. Or no. You're not president. You have to be nominated for whatever that process is. What was the hardest part that you had to learn how to accept about yourself throughout that process?
Oh my God. The hardest thing that I had to accept about myself, I had to accept that I was a good writer. Like, that was the hardest thing.
What?
Yeah, that was the hardest thing because, again, going back to it, previously, before all of this, I was, again, very secretive. The only other person that I really shared any kind of art with, I had like 3 people, and it was like my oldest sister, Courtney, my niece, Marilee, and then my best friend, Olivia. And those were like the 3 people, and that was it. You know, I didn't showcase any other creative stuff to really anybody except for a first date that I was trying to impress. And I was like, here's a poem that I wrote in 20 seconds, you know, but that was it. You know, but even then, I was just kind of like, oh, this is like another thing. I didn't see myself as like this great, impactful writer. I still don't necessarily think that to an extent, but I am a good writer. I won a contest. It got picked up by a production company to be made. And that in of itself was the hardest thing for me to accept, was that I was just simply a good writer. I think that writers, and just creatives in general, we are our worst self-critics.
We are the worst critic, of course.
You know, and getting to that place where I was like, oh, this is good enough to be made. I was like, okay. You know, that was just an incredibly difficult obstacle to tackle. But I do think that I've reached, I've definitely gotten over that hump just because I was like, well, I didn't put all this work into nothing. And I think seeing the rough cut really helped solidify it. Like, oh, this is something good.
Okay.
Oh, this is something good. I don't want to get, like, way too excited. Like, my biggest thing is I was like, I don't want to get way too excited. But... because I also don't want to create false expectations.
Okay.
And that was probably the difficult thing, was like understanding that something is good while also creating reasonable expectations for myself. Because sometimes whenever you think I'm a good writer, I'm a good creative, you get a little way too in your head, and you're like, I'm God. I am the best writer in the world.
Yeah.
Edgar Allan Poe, who is she? I don't know. And there would be sometimes where I would have little fits of that, where I was like, oh my God.
The ego check. That you got to keep the ego in check, especially when you feel like when all the things that are happening, you just have to learn how to, temper your expectations and your ego, because sometimes it's really easy to get carried away.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
It's finding that balance. And that was really, really difficult, because there would just be sometimes where I was at like really, really difficult lows where I'm like, oh my God, I'm the worst writer in the world. Oh my God, this isn't going to be made into anything or whatever. And then there would be sometimes where I'm like, hi, I'm the coming of Christ. Here are the new 12 commandments. No. And yeah, it was like, but it came down to having like a really strong creative support system that really kind of that keeps you grounded while also motivated.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you familiar with the Try Guys?
Yes.
There's one cast, I believe Eric, or it's the Asian dude. Eugene. I've seen Amanda, my girlfriend, she was the one who introduced me to Try Guys. I would not have known about them if it was for her. Amanda, if you're watching this, thank you so much.
God, I love Amanda.
This is now helpful for this podcast. I've seen his transformation from, when he first got out of BuzzFeed and when they all started getting together.
Yeah.
You could tell that the first transformation that he had at the beginning all the way to the end, where it's like a slow embrace of accepting every part of himself. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's happening to you too, because since you started writing and you kept all this to yourself, I think you're going on the same path that he is doing. And I think that's something to be proud of. And the other thing I have to say is that it's really interesting that you had this internal dynamic of wondering, you had this internal dynamic of not knowing why you think you're not a great writer, when there's literally other people who are going through the exact same thing with the same issues that they're facing internally and externally that could be just inspired by your story.
Right.
It's just really interesting that we feel that way inside, and it shows, or from your perspective, just bleeds into your work. It's so hard to see. So how is it? How do you keep yourself reminded that there are other people that are going through the exact same thing that you are going through?
Well, sort of similar to how I mentioned earlier, it comes down to really having that creative support system.
Okay.
And having those people that are going through the same things and being a part of like sort of a creative community. You have just like those friends. I mean, you've interviewed Danny before. Like Danny,
love you, Danny.
Yeah, Danny Joseph is like literally my best friend, and he is straight up like my creative therapist. When it comes to any sort of creative rut or anything like that, I just literally will call him up, and I'm like, "Hey, baby, this is what I'm going through and everything." But it's also like other people, who have gone through very similar things. Like there is a really incredible producer named Erica Dukes who worked for Vivid Bridge for a minute. She's really like she worked for Vivid Bridge for a minute. And then also, again, like there's just such a beautiful community in like the Emerald Coast where we're all trying to make something. And I guess like it just comes down to whenever I need it the most, I will just reach out to like those people in my creative support system of just being like, hey, I'm going through X, Y, and Z, whether it's like a production issue, whether it's a creative issue in regards to the actual writing process, if I'm stuck in writer's block or anything like that. And I just will like, and I always ask for sort of like emotional consent first of like, hey, can I just like word vomit all over you? Or, hey, can you give me some feedback or anything like that? And then I just kind of go from there. And then typically it's after like one conversation with Danny, I'm like, okay, I'm good.
Usually I feel like in therapy, usually when you let people talk, they actually are the one that solves the problem. When you just let them vent everything, they're like, oh, wait, you know what? You're right. I think I should do that. What they haven't even said anything. It just takes that one right person to let you vent everything in a safe space. That's the most important thing.
Well, and then also like really creating that space of, okay, this is a space for me where I could just completely vent to you and I get no feedback, or I need a different opinion. I need you to call me out on something that's missing here, you know, and just creating that kind of space before the conversation even happens to allow those positive creative conversations to flow. Because there are also some times where I'll like call up a friend, and this isn't like Danny, this will be like other people, right? And they sit there and they give me the most unwarranted feedback ever, and I'm like, no, I just needed to vomit, you know. But it's like creating that space beforehand where you can kind of have that grounding, or you can have that raising up.
Well, let's take a step back here. What not just friends but your family, how did they respond to you now that they've seen you working on stuff like this? Because let me tell you, man, parents, we love you. We know that you're trying to do what's best for us. But there are some times where they might not understand completely why we're doing things in a certain way. And especially in the creative field. Okay? They will never understand it because they come from a background that's completely and vastly different in how they live versus how we live now. How have they responded to you with this creative project that you've been working so tirelessly on?
It's really interesting because my family, it's like two opposite sides of the same coin, right?
Really?
So I have 3 older siblings, all of which are 10 plus years older than me, right? All of which have all completely different personalities. Like, no, seriously. And then I also have my mother, who... she comes from a more conservative background. She has a more conservative frame of mind. And whenever she heard about the subject matter, you know, it was one of those things where there is like sort of, she's like, this is really cool, but also like, I don't want you to go down the wrong path, because she hears the stories of like the Lindsay Lohans. She hears about the, you know, who like get so, and it came from a place of caution of like, I want you to be safe and I want you to be okay, because, you know, I've heard of these stories and everything like that. And
but the stories don't always reflect accurately.
Well, I've said like film doesn't equal Hollywood, you know, but even then, like there are people that have extremely positive experiences in Hollywood and everything like that. And I've said, and I've straight up had to kind of tell her sort of my intentions with this film, of really the story that I'm trying to tell. And it's taken a lot of conversation. And I think it not only comes from allowing the space for them to have an open ear of what you're trying to do, but also you yourself, of allowing yourself to hear their hesitancies and hearing where maybe they are concerned in regards to certain things, and really trying to figure out that gap, you know, or trying to bridge that gap of those differing opinions. Because there were some things that she kind of mentioned where I did understand where she was coming from. She ultimately comes from a place of like, I want you to be safe. And I kind of shifted the conversation of, okay, well, this is what I'm doing in order to make sure that I am safe. You know, to kind of create that feeling of safety that she has. And I mean, I have another, like my oldest sister, Courtney, she's like literally, she's been like my biggest creative cheerleader, like since.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you, Courtney. I love you, girl. I mean, she's been like really a huge driving force in my creativity since I was a child. I mean, I was like literally 11 and she showed me the musical of Rent.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, you know, she was she's the reason why I saw like a gay person on my TV screens for the first time, because it was like, and it was just simply because this was a group of people that she associated herself with. She didn't see anything wrong with these things. So it's like she and I have a very, very similar point of view when it comes to a lot of things. So that kind of conversation, there didn't need to be, because those conversations already had been had.
Yeah.
And because that's just kind of how our relationship always was. I have another sister who lives in Mississippi and everything, and things are like a little bit more distant, you know, between all this. There's love, but it's very much like a, okay, love ya.
It's a very short type.
My nieces and nephews, they know that I'm a filmmaker and everything.
Yeah.
They don't know the subject matter, but they know that I make movies, and there is sort of like a level of intrigue there, but they're also at an age where I can't necessarily sit there and go through the intricacies of like storytelling and directing and all of that stuff. They just know, oh, I'm making a movie. And then there's my brother, who is like, I love him to absolute death, and he is just kind of like, I mean, he literally bragged. Like, we don't sit and talk about the intricacies of the film, but he is, like, generally very supportive. I mean, he was, like, literally at, like a birthday party with, like, this, with the mother of, like, one of his best friends and everything. And it was one of those things where, like, conversations started to get a little bit awkward, but he started talking about how the fact that I'm a filmmaker, and he was, like, generally, and he expressed to me that he's generally very proud of me. And, even though, like, the subject, like, this guy is, like, total dude, bro, like, straight guy. It's really funny because we look very similar visually, but, like, it's, like, he is, like, I'm going to sit and, you know, drink my beer while watching, like, football and, like, go sports, like, hoorah, like, all of those different things. And I'm, like, loves it. You know, it's really funny because, like, the UFC and, like, MMA has become kind of, like, a bridge with those conversations. But yeah, he's, like, it's really weird because all 4 of these people in my life, it's all so different with their points of view. Because my sister, she will literally, like, my oldest sister, Courtney, she'll sit there and she'll spitfire, like, different ideas. In fact, a lot of the scenes that are in Smoke Breaks, she's literally come up with while I was in a creative rut. And you'll see, and I'll, like, when you actually see, I'll like, kind of tell you what scenes there are that she's helped write. But it's, like, you know, and then, again, it's like the perspectives of each of my family members are also different because I have a sister that literally has, like, really no idea because she just lives in a completely different, like, even though she lives in the South, it's like, I mean, she just bought, like, 120 acres in the middle of nowhere, Mississippi, you know, and then there's my brother who is like, woo, cool that you're making a movie, awesome, great, and then there's my mother being like, I just want you to be safe. Well, tying it all into
oh my gosh, that's a lot of, that's completely, like, inside out. You have multiple characters.
I mean, it's like, I very much describe my family as, like, we are just kind of like,
it's like a happy bunch of family.
Like, we're just a bunch of loudmouth Italians.
Oh, like the Sopranos.
Yeah, we're just a bunch of loudmouth Italians.
Without the mob ties. No mob ties, right? Okay, you're not gonna. I'm not gonna get mobbed after this.
No.
As difficult as it may be. Now that you're at a place where you have the ability to showcase your story, what is one thing that you could say to people that are going through that at a young age with their parents, with what they're trying to, when they're trying to figure out who they really are?
So really, I mean, I just think it comes down to go with things at your own pace.
Okay.
When it comes to, like, young, like, I'm assuming that it's, like, gearing towards, like, queer youth and everything because that's, like, really a huge part of my story, is it really comes down to go with things at your own pace, and for one, make sure that your physical safety is at your utmost priority. And if you're in a place where you aren't physically safe to kind of express your own queerness and everything, really, I mean, as difficult as it is, really try your best to kind of keep it to yourself and really allow yourself to have those internal conversations first until you are able to get into a physically safe space. And then once you are, or if you are, go at it at your own pace. The minute that you start having a crush on a boy, you don't have to scream, "Hey, mom, I love dudes." You don't. That's not necessarily the thing. You know, make sure that you're at a place in yourself where you are comfortable and you've had those that sense of internal dialogue. Have those conversations with, like, safe friends or, you know, before you maybe go up to a family member that maybe has a differing opinion, and also come at it from an open mind. Because that was, like, a huge thing of my journey is, again, the natural hesitancies that I was met with my mother, because, again, she comes from a more conservative point of view. Not only did I wish for her to listen, I also had to listen for her as well, and it came from just having open ears on both sides. And also, again, like, when you have those conversations, come at it from a place of just sort of emotional exploration between the two of you.
My brother, well, I've watched him go through that same exact thing, and I was at it was at an old house, and the one I just recently moved out of. We were just, I was doing my thing, and then he came out, and I was like, that didn't really change how I saw him. The only thing I just joked with him was like, oh, so that's why you've been calling me gay all this years, bro? You're just projecting onto me?
I have a very similar story to that. Like,
but it didn't really change who he was to me.
No.
Like,
it shouldn't. It's like...
Yeah, it really shouldn't. But I just saw the struggle, though, with my parents.
Yeah.
With my brother, I'm like, one, like your mom, they were coming from a conservative standpoint. But the one thing I'm really proud of seeing what they've done with my brother is that they've grown. They're still having difficulty of accepting, but the fact that they're taking efforts in making sure that the space that he's in, he's emotionally and physically and psychologically safe with them. Even though my mom and dad have such a hard time, still do to this day, to really comprehend it, but they do it so with love, knowing that just because he just doesn't follow the norm doesn't mean he's any different. He's the same brother he's the same brother that I talk shit at and still love him the same.
No, yeah, I mean, and that's like exactly how it is. I remember when I first like came out to my sister and my brother-in-law, again, because they were like sort of who I felt were the, you know, emotionally the safest people. Because again, I mean, my sister was showing me drag queens when I was like 11 years old, you know, and I came out at like 14, 15.
Yeah.
And I remember there was like literally this day, and I just knew, I was like, this is the day I'm gonna come out. Day I'm gonna come out. And it was so dramatic. I was like playing like Pierce the Veil on my like iPod Nano and everything. I was like such a little scene baby. And I like come home, and again I knew I was like in my head. I mean, when you're in that headspace of like, 'cause your life is gonna change no matter what, you know. And I was like, this is gonna be the day that I just had to come out. I thought I was gonna get kicked out. Like I was really thinking the worst. And I go in, I slam my door, and I was like just sobbing because I knew, I was like, my life is gonna change. Oh my God, they're gonna find out that I like boys. Like what? And I'm like sobbing, and mind you, I lived in a very thin-walled household, so my sister could hear me just like sobbing. And she's like, well, and I'm like, what? She's like, open the door. And I'm like, no, I just want to die. And she's like, well, you can't say that with a locked door. Because she's thinking like, girl, I don't need a suicide up in here. Like, no, okay. And she's like, well, you can't say comments like that and keep the door locked. So I unlocked the door, and she's like, do you want to talk about it? And I said, no. Because again, I didn't want to come out. I was like, at this point, I was so vulnerable. And then she was like, okay. And she looks at my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
And she's like, this is your job. And he's like, okay. And my brother-in-law comes in, and like, Adam, I fucking love this human being. He's literally like a second dad to me at this point. He's known me since I was like literally a baby, okay? So he comes in, he's like, what's going on, buddy? And I was like, I'm gay. And he's like, oh yeah? He's like, so why are you acting like such a fucking weirdo? Okay. And I was like, I mean, legitimately, like, my life flashed before my eyes. I was like, oh my God, like, I'm not getting kicked out and burned at the stake. And it was just like it was kind of crazy. But then again, like, my mother came at it from a very hesitant standpoint. You know, she was very hesitant, and it was like a little bit more difficult. She thought it was like a phase, like all of these different things. And it came from just, she's not had a lot of conversations with a lot of openly gay people before me. My mother is a child of is a conservative child of the 60s. And it came from just conversation and from coming at things from like a loving standpoint on both ends. Because, I mean, I was coming out, like, right as my father, like, just passed away, you know? So it was like, oh my... So in her eyes, you know, even though I more or less disagree with it, I'm not necessarily invalidating it, but she, in a way, felt like she was losing a part of her son that she was that she previously perceived me by. Not that she didn't love me, but it's just like now, like, I mean, when you're a parent, you have all of these expectations of what your child is going to be like, and then when it kind of deviates from that, there is sort of a grieving period that you kind of go through, and it's hard on both ends, but at the end of the day, when you kind of come at things from a very open point of view of like, I'm just coming here to love and understand, it creates and me and my mother, we have a very strong relationship nowadays, like in adulthood, like because we've had these conversations.
Right. Well, I'm so sorry that your dad passed away, but
Maybe I've been through the therapy. I'm finally, honestly, it's like...
You did the other therapy. This is now my therapy. I've run the shit.
No, seriously. I mean, you know, it's made me who I am, and you know, it's one of those things where, I mean, people die. It was unfortunate that it was at a young age, and yes, I did get a couple bruises from it, but they've healed. You know?
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. Parental figures. We still, regardless of how we feel towards our parents as we age, having a parental figures to be there no matter what at this stage of our lives, having that compass is always going to be a good thing. And even if they don't agree with you on certain things, just having that having them as a compass throughout your life is always going to be something that is so important. And when you lose a little bit of that, it becomes harder to navigate, because sure, you might have friends and everybody else, depending on the relationship who you have with them. It's always the parents that we always go back to, because they know that even though they are as conservative, they may have different thoughts. The fact is that they are the ones that we go to.
We're genetically bound to these people.
Yes.
I mean, seriously, I'm the product of my dad's sperm. I am him to an extent.
Yeah.
You know, it was really interesting because I had, like, because of the fact that he passed away when I was 12 and everything, there was just like this idea of him that I had that was completely misconstrued, that was ultimately put on him so that he felt he could be a good dad, right? And he was an incredible father. Like, seriously, he is an incredible father. Dad, if you're out there, I love you. But it's been really interesting because these past, like, 13 to 14 years, 13 years. Yeah, it's been 13 years, holy shit. That he's been gone, through the conversations I've had with my aunts and my uncles about him, there was a period of me where I did go through an existential crisis where I was like, oh my God, like, why am I the way that I am, you know?
Yeah.
And it turned out, holy shit, I'm literally just the byproduct of my father.
Okay.
He was very loud and he was very emotionally intense sometimes.
Oh, wow.
And he was a very big personality. He was very tall. Like, again, he and I, like, if you look at pictures of him when he was like 20, in his 20s, we look very similar.
Okay.
And we act very similar. It's just I'm a whole lot gayer. No, really. So there was this, like, sense of identity that was in a way lost, or, you know, that I had found through these conversations. But it's been a very interesting process, because you're right, there is sort of this figure that is sort of needed in a child's life and everything. And I didn't really start to find that, because I had my big brother, I had my brother-in-law and everything, but it's not the same as, like, a father, as a paternal figure.
Yeah.
Yes, my brother-in-law was a paternal figure, and he was a father, but he wasn't my father, you know?
Yeah.
I finally started to kind of heal that part of myself when it was a sort of a subconscious symptom of training in MMA, of really healing my daddy issues. In a sense, the specific gym that I train at, it's called the Academy of Pensacola.
Right.
There are a lot of incredible fathers who are just there for their children, and they treat a lot of the younger men as if they're their own sons, including myself. You know, I very much felt a very familial energy, and I still do, which is why I'm still training. It's like there is such a unique familial energy that's brought into that gym that I didn't realize that I had lost until I experienced it. I remember there was a point where I legitimately started to cry, like, midway through my training, and it was because it was like tears of joy, because I finally felt reconnected with something that I didn't know was lost. And it was because I started to develop this relationship with the coaches at my gym. I mean, it's like, I kind of like to say that I have, like, 5 dads now.
Yeah.
You know, there's, like, Coach Fred, there's, like, Coach Paul, Toshi, like, Andis, Mike, like, Papa John, like, all of these people, like, these really strong men who are there for their kids as well as people at the gym. It was just this, like, oh my God, this is something that that I found that I didn't know that I had lost. And, you know, that was just like a very positive byproduct of it. So when you're talking about that, I was like, whoa! It, like, kind of reconnected the dots of, like, okay, like, this is why I say that I'm good, you know? And it's because, like, I have that energy in my life now.
Thank you for sharing. Seriously, thank you for being so vulnerable and for being open about sharing that specific story. No, that's the kind of podcast I want to put out.
Yeah.
That's the kind of vulnerability that I would rather show to people than just saying, yeah, I got 5 stacks of Millie Cash, I got 2 G wagons and a Lamborghini in my back. No, that's not the real thing. It's just, but.
What is the emotional journey of filmmaking and being a
just
creative?
Like a film journey. The act you're going through, act 1, act 2, act 3. All right. But seriously though, being open and that takes courage. So thank you so much for being open about that. Well, and I think the way I see about it, I think that your dad will feel the same way. He will be so happy about how strong and how much courage that you build up for yourself to become who you are.
Yeah.
That's something that, what would be one thing that you would say to him if you could right now?
I would just be like, "Sup, bro?" No. I mean,
even though you lost that at a younger age, it's just.
If I could go and like talk to my dad, I would just give him like a hug because like my dad, he had this energy about him where he was. Again, incredibly intense, but he was a very strong and safe person. And he gave like literally the best bear hugs. It smelled like traditional Old Spice. It was consistent, and that's really what I would do. I don't even necessarily think that I would have a conversation with him. I would just hug him because he left such a strong physical imprint on this world. It was so weird because again, he wasn't so much of an open book, as probably I am. That was probably like the big difference and everything. I remember I went to his when the funeral happened, it was like there were like over 60 people that came up and they were like, dude, your dad is the GOAT. And this was like 60 people beyond like the 150 people that were in our family, like that came along, There was like this small group of scientists that he had worked with because he was an oceanographer for Stennis Space Center.
Wow.
That was like his whole thing. Yeah, so he helped like construct and build like the modern day buoy system like over at Stennis Space Center. That was like his whole gig.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna connect one more dot. You say you want to be a marine biologist. He's an ocean.
Well, no, that was a huge thing. It was like I was inspired and I was like, oh my god, I have to keep on. Like I have to carry on the family business. I went more so towards my mother's side because she's a speech therapist. It was so funny because my mother's a speech therapist, my sister's a physical therapist, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going psychotherapy. And, but originally I thought that I was going to go down the marine biology side because my dad, he and we would go to like the New Orleans Aquarium like every single weekend when I was a kid. And he would take me out there and we would like literally look at, I remember there was like a period when I was like 3 years old where I was like obsessed with jellyfish. I still am. I still consider jellyfish my favorite animal because I just like was so enthralled by just their like
how
weird,
beautiful they are. And you like.
And they're also like extremely dangerous at the same time. So they're like really beautiful baddies of the ocean. And I like was like 3 years old and I made this entire book and I still have the book. It's called like the Jelly Book, right? And I like basically associated like all of my family members with like different species of jellyfish. I like would literally write these papers about jellyfish and all of just like my fascinations with them. I can still name off of like all of these little fun. It was just crazy, and so I thought that originally that was where my life was headed, was down the marine bio like oceanography route. And it turns out I'm terrible at math, and you need to be really good at math in order to do like marine biology and anything related to the ocean. And I didn't think that. I literally thought it was just like swimming around and being like a doggy daycare.
Yeah.
But for like marine animals, no. It turns out you need to like learn like pH levels and like you have to do a whole bunch of calculations.
Levels, pH, and all of that. Yeah.
Like salinity and like all of that type of stuff. And I was like, girl, this is not my gig. Okay, I just want to like play around with like the little octopi.
I'm sorry, but this is not a real life Disney. Okay, all right.
No, literally, and I thought, I was like, oh my god, and when I went to college, I was like, whoa, this is like gonna be Pixar. No.
Well, welcome to reality. Well, I think that's a perfect segue from the Jelly Book, I guess. Yeah. Screenwriting. What led you to the world of screenwriting? Because you mentioned like poetry, all of that. How did that translate into screenwriting at that point?
I think like screenwriting.
Especially when it was by accident. I remember doing that research.
Yeah.
You mentioned it was just by accident.
It was legitimately by complete accident. So yeah, in high school I was like very much like an emotional little like poetry writer and everything. I had this one teacher named Miss Frank. Miss Frank, if you're here, hey girl, what's up? She was like funnily enough, she was a psychology teacher, and she was like a coach for like our slam poetry. She like created this like slam poetry team, right?
Okay.
And I was like, oh my god, these people are like the coolest people ever, right? And but the thing is that her like specific way of doing slam poetry was extremely theatrical, and everybody who was on the team, like there were these two girls named Annalisa Garofalo and Samantha Devon, who did like both these like incredible pieces, and they had a lot of theatricality to their poetic performances and everything. I think a lot of people, they have this like misconception that poetry is just like this deep like lolly, like,
a bunch of
oh my god, like I'm depressed, whatever. And there was like, again, I'm gonna tie it back to this girl Sam, and you need to put this in a tuk-tuk so I could like shout her out, because she, I think, was like part of the catalyst to like really my creative process, because she wrote this like feminist piece. Mind you, this is not appropriate in this day and age. She was like 17 years old, and she wrote this poetry piece about basically how being a woman is sometimes attributed to automatically being a porn star. And it was this like really incredibly empowering feminist piece, you know? And basically in how a lot of women, even from like an early age in childhood, are treated as if they are these like enamored, overly romanticized like sex objects and everything. And this is like a girl who's like 16 talking about this, and she just spoke in such a way that felt like natural dialogue. It wasn't like this, it was very, very poetry, but it wasn't like lolly and like overly flowery. There was a directiveness that her speech had, and I was very much inspired by that. And so that was sort of the catalyst to poetry, into writing it, because I loved how direct specifically this girl Sam's writing was, and she just eloquated her words in such a directive way. And so I sort of was like, okay, that's really, really great. So I started writing poetry in that kind of context, you know, in writing just think pieces from a more romantic point of view. And then and then I eventually wanted to be like a novelist, and I was like, I'm gonna be just like non-controversial J.K. Rowling. Like that was my dream. I was like, I'm gonna make a novel, and I'm gonna make a novel, and it's gonna sell out a whole bunch of books. Like, great, awesome. And right as I was finished with my undergrad, I was working at a local coffee shop, and I was working on this novel that was sort of inspired by my experiences at this coffee shop, and specifically by the regulars at this coffee shop. And one of the regulars was this guy named Chris Jadala, who owns a little film production company.
Calliope,
Him and Sierra, like he and his girlfriend Sierra Hobbs were like my regulars out there, and we just like became friendly acquaintances. Like we would have our little like 30-minute conversations. I was always the guy at the cashier because I could never actually make a cup of coffee for shit. Like legitimately, like my manager Michaela was like, no. They were like, she's like, you love to talk like way too much. We're just gonna put you at the cashier's counter, right? And that was like my thing. So I was like always the front-facing person that would make. That would always take these people's orders and everything. And Chris and I mean, Chris was always coming downtown for anything, whether it was for meetings for coffee, whether it was like for anything. And we just built sort of like a minimal rapport with each other. And then there was a day where I was working, and it was like my fourth draft of this novel. And he was like, and he just sees me typing, and he was like, what are you working on? I was like, oh, I'm working on this novel. Yeah, it was like, no, what? I would go to the coffee shop because I would get free coffee, and I would just, like, even on my off days, I would sit and hang out with my coworkers, and I would just sit and write my novel. And he was like, what are you working on? And I was like, oh, just like this tiny little novel, like, no big deal. But he was like, let me read some of it. And I was like, okay. And
wait, can I ask? Yeah. Did that fear you mentioned earlier when you had that fear of showing certain things? Did that come up?
That was like holy crap! Like, oh my god, I was terrified. But me and Chris already had such a rapport that I felt very artistically safe with him.
Okay.
You know, I had seen some of his Kitty Get a Job skits and everything, and I was like, okay, this guy's a little bit unhinged in the best way. So I was like, okay, I can get down with this guy. I can like show him a little bit, you know? And I showed him like 2 or 3 paragraphs, and he was like, dude, have you ever thought about getting into screenwriting? I thought like screenwriting was something that I was like, this is so like out of reach, really.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was possible. And he was like, if you write me a script, I'll get it made into something. And I was like,
Damn.
okay. And I was like, okay. So I already had the regulars like on lock. Like I literally knew what the characters would say in all the arcs like by hand. And I was like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But I'm going to do it. And there was just sort of this instinct in my head that I was like, okay, this is like something that I need to do. So I transcribed the book into a script, and I think it took me about a month and a half. He told me, he said, if you give me a script and a pitch deck, I'm going to do whatever I can to make this into something. And I said, okay.
Damn.
And it felt like a deal with the devil. I was like, this is going to be something that, like, I shouldn't be doing, but I was like, I need to. Because, again, I was also, like, an active working grad student, right? And so I was like, all right, whatever. So I submitted it to him, and he was like, dude, what the hell? He's like, you did this in like a month and a half? And I was like, I don't know. I knew it took a while, you know? And he was like, no. And because in my head, it took a while because, again, I had this like novel, like it was written in the back of my hand. So I thought, oh, you could easily get this done in like 3 days. No, it turns out transcribing the dialogue of an entire novel is like really hard. But so then it was like we built a bit of like an artistic relationship through there, and then a coffee shop named Jitterbug opened like 6 months later over in Pensacola, and I met this beautiful shaggy-haired queer woman named Lainey, and she said, hey, like, you're clearly gay and you love to write. We're doing a showing, and it was like this. It was this one film about the Southern Decadence Festival that happens in the fall every year by this guy named Stuart Socks, who he and I are friends now. And it was just like about this big queer festival in New Orleans that happened every single year. And she was like, why don't you go to this showing? It's in like a week. And I was like, okay, cool. That was how I got involved with Stamp Film Festival. And then another 2 months later happened. I get introduced to Del Shores and Emerson Collins and the Del Shores Foundation, and I'm like, hey, this is like this screenwriting thing. I'm so new to this, but like, I kind of want to do it. And they were like, well, we have this contest every single year where we try to uplift like Southern queer writers. Yeah. And they were like, you should submit. And I was like, well, I have a full-length feature that I could submit. And they were like, well, why don't you also like try and submit a short? So I was like, okay. So I submitted the regulars, and I also submitted. That was where Smoke Breaks came to be. I was like, okay, well, I want like extra credit. I thought I was like, the feature film is going to be my shoe-in, right? But then I was like, okay, I like extra credit. I'm going to do this. I don't know how to write a short film, but I'm going to do it. And I just kind of submitted it. I honestly say it was like a screw it script because I wrote it on the first draft, and then I think I literally did like a second look over like 30 minutes before it was due, and then I submitted it. And just on a whim, I didn't think that it was going to be doing anything, but I was like, you know what? Great experience. Yeah. Cool. Whatever. I then get a call a month later from Emerson Collins being like, hey, BB, do you want to get on a Zoom call? And I was like, sure. And we both, like, all 3 of us on Zoom are like, what the hell? And it turned out that I was the winner of the entire thing. I think I beat out maybe like 15 to 20 other scripts. I don't know the exact number per se. That was just sort of the number that I theorized because this contest is like a very regional contest, and it takes over the span of like, I think 13 different states. And I mean, I was like the winner, and then that was how it all kind of, that was how everything came to be because again, there was this like little instinct, and I like the minute that I found out that I had won the script, that I had won the contest, I contacted Chris, and I said, hey, there's this project that I won a contest for. Let's meet up for coffee, and that was it, really. And that was kind of how it all happened.
First of all, Congratulations to that. That had to be something so positive and something so validating, especially with the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, it was very affirming, but I think it honestly for a minute it made the imposter syndrome worse because I was like, why? Well, no, because I was like, why me? You know, I was like, what the, like, you know, and
Well, you found yourself comparing to the other people, even though your story is just as valid as theirs.
it wasn't necessarily a matter of comparing myself to these people because I didn't know them, but I was like. I kept on trying to find the deeper meaning in things rather than like truly accepting it for what it was.
Yeah.
And that was like sort of my biggest flaw, you know, because the other thing was I was like, okay, because I had the meeting with Chris and everything, and basically he was like, because the prize money was like a $2,000 grant, and he was like, you're like, good that you got $2,000, but it's really expensive to make a movie. And I was like, okay.
People, you don't know how much it is.
No, it's a lot. It's a lot of money. And then basically we were like, okay, he's like, we're gonna make something.
Okay.
But he's like, typically most projects that we do are between like the 50 and 60K range. I was like, how am I gonna make like, I mean, he was like, he noted like a previous project of his where it was like literally 150,000, you know? And I was like, whoa, that's expensive. I don't know how I'm going to do. And that was where the imposter syndrome started to happen. It was not even necessarily like imposter syndrome of like, why me? But it was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? What did I get myself into? And, I mean, it all worked out at the end of the day, but yeah, that was like, those were the initial feelings of it all, was like, how am I going to do this? I have 2K in a dream. And, but it all just kind of worked out because Dell and Emerson and the Dell Shores Foundation as a whole, it's really weird because again, I thought I was like, this is just going to be a one and done kind of thing. But really, I mean, their intention is to uplift Southern queer writers, and they really do mean it in their heart of hearts. They've literally held my hand throughout this entire process. I mean, Dell is like a name in Hollywood. He was like best friends with Olivia Newton-John and Leslie Jordan. Like, he's literally written for Warner Brothers for like 25 years. Like, this guy, he was like one of the original writers of the original Queer as Folk in the 90s. Like, he's a name. You know, and like Emerson Collins works with like some of the biggest drag queens in the entire world. Like I mean, I don't know if Amanda follows like RuPaul's Drag Race and everything, but seriously, like they fall, like, I mean, they are and they are constantly on the road working and like doing things. And so I thought like, oh, this is like, and this isn't any fault of their own, but my original thing was like, okay, this is just like a one and done thing. I'm going to take the $2,000 grant. I'm going to go on the trip for the Writers Festival, because that was another thing, is we got like a paid trip to the Writers Festival that they host every single year and everything like that. But no, it went beyond that. They like helped me network with people to potentially receive the funding for this film and everything to make this project even possible in the first place. And it was like really through those two, as well as Chris and Sierra, really putting their hand down and giving me, you know, their undivided attention for these meetings and everything, that I was able to make this happen. I always say, like, this project is just as much there in the cast as it is my own. Yes, I wrote the script. Yes, it was my idea. And yes, people happen to respond to it. And yes, I directed it. But it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the feeling of community that all of these people kind of provided me.
Well, I just have one question. I have a lot.
Okay.
How hard was it because when we work on something, it's our baby, right?
Right.
We take care of it. We are the ones that should be the one. Like, we're supposed to carry it. We don't want anybody else to touch it. How, as a screenwriter, how were you able to trust in their artistic vision to really stay true as close as possible to the source material? Because that doesn't always happen all the time. Sometimes they have a vision where it might be so vastly different, and you might feel like, well, I want you to respect this is what I've been envisioning for my project. And when you hear something completely different, it's going to be hard. It's going to be something it goes beyond just professional. It becomes like a personal, for some people, it might feel personal when somebody else wants to change it, even though it's our baby.
Right.
How did you do that?
A lot of hard conversations. That was really what it was. So there were many iterations of the script, I literally think, like, I mean, there were different iterations. Like, I gave the actors, like, literally a different script, like, the day before.
Oh, wow.
Like, I mean, there were just, like, there were always changes going on. And a lot of it came from, because it was really interesting because, again, you take, like, a ragingly young, like, homosexual young filmmaker whose first time, like, is wanting to direct for the first time.
Yeah.
And then you also have a DP who has been in film for over 20 years and is a Middle Eastern straight man, right?
Yeah.
There's clearly a difference in experience and clearly a difference in artistic point of view.
Yeah.
But Chris and Sierra and I and Del and Emerson, I mean, Chris and Sierra would have our own conversations, and then we would have conversations with Del and Emerson. Really, it just took a lot of conversations of, like, how, like, there was literally a day where we went line by line of how we want things to look. I think it was like 6 months before. It takes a lot of pre-planning. That was a big thing that, like, Erica Dukes, like, really, really grinded in me, was like pre-production.
Yes.
Have a strong voice for your film before it's even made, because there's 3 different identities that it has, you know? And I was like, okay, great, cool. I was creating mood boards literally the minute that I found out that I won the contest. And it took literally, like, months and months of conversation of, like, what are the references that we want to take on. And so I was telling, you know, I sent Chris a lot of this. I think it takes conversation and a lot of trust. But in order to build that sense of trust, you have to have those conversations, and you have to have those moments where you just completely disagree on something. And that was naturally met with Chris and I, because we do have 2 completely different artistic points of view. And I think it's really good to kind of, like, I think having a third person like Sierra was really, really beneficial, you know, in having that sort of middle ground, because she does also come from a queer perspective herself as a bisexual woman. But it was us 3, you know, having months and months of conversations and really taking the time to dig deep within ourselves to reveal what the project was to each other. You know, that was, like, a huge, huge thing. I mean, we were literally scouting film, like, our shoot sites, like, literally 2 months before, like, we even shot. Like, we took about 2 weeks in total, like, of scouting.
That's just pre-production alone. You haven't even touched the lighting. I'm assuming Chris has a process where he has to go through the lighting.
Well, and that's what we did during our scouting, really, was, like, we looked at every single angle of where we want to shoot. And it was a very and he told me right from the get-go, he said, it's going to be a very tedious process.
Right.
But that's the kind of process that you need to go through in order to make a really, like, because he became invested in this project just as much as I was. This became his baby just as much as it was mine.
Right.
And you need to kind of have that point of view from your DP in order to create a good product. I mean, it was really weird because there were just times where, again, like, he and I, we were, like, creatively kind of we were creatively at odds, but that also created a lot of strength between us, you know, where we were able to kind of take breathers and be like, okay. And we eventually came up with stuff that was even greater for the film that I didn't even anticipate.
Okay, first of all, it's like that process. Not a lot of people are really educated in that specific pre-production phase, because a lot of people think it's just like you can go out and shoot, but in order to really make a great film, you really have to take great care, like what you said, in the pre-production, because that's what determines the every part of the film going forward, especially post-production, because you don't ever want to go into post-production only to find out, hey, we have to reshoot.
No, absolutely. And that was, like, a big thing that we were trying to avoid. Because even though we did have a budget, we had a very limited budget, you know, compared to a lot of, like, other projects. And that was, like, a big thing that Del, as a mentor, very much enforced in me. What, like, when we were going through the different iterations of the script, was really understanding the intention of every single scene. Every single scene, every single piece of dialogue, how is it going to move the story? What, and then going to the DP side, what is the intention of every single shot? What is the intention of every single
Even
angle
camera
that you were
movements,
trying to do?
choice of color.
Yeah, choice of color
everything.
and everything. And I mean, Chris and I, I think a huge inspiration behind the like pre-production process
Yeah.
was like, there's one particular video that I always kind of turn back to, and it's like Greta Gerwig's like references, all of the references that she made for Barbie.
Yeah.
She has like,
yeah.
she has like over 30 film references.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I need to do that for Smoke Breaks. And I did that, and I think I came up with like maybe 8 different films in total that kind of inspired the project in of itself. And this is
Okay.
again for like an 11, 24-minute film. I believe that every great project, and I mean this goes with every single director that has inspired me, they have just an entire Rolodex, and they find how the mayonnaise meets the peanut butter and they smush it together and they see how it works. And that's really what Chris, Sierra, and I did with the collaboration of Dylan Emerson did to create sort of what Smoke Breaks is.
You just brought us to a roller coaster of a ride when it comes to the pre-production and your process of the entire project. Now, I believe you left off where, I think it was the screenwriting where you were talking about with Sierra and Chris.
Yeah, so sort of
take us from there.
So sort of how those conversations really went about. At the end of the day, I think really creating a space where difficult conversations can be had creates really impactful art, I think, at the end of the day. And that's really what happens with the pre-production process is it's like you have to get those conversations out, because the last thing that you want is difficulties and creative differences when it comes to the actual shooting process. At least that's from what I've learned. Okay, again, mind you, this is like my first film set that I had like ever directed. Like it was the first film set that I had ever technically been on. Besides maybe like a little short film that I worked on with a friend. But like this was the first professional film set that I'd ever truly been on. And this was the first project that I had ever actually directed. So I really was like, I should have been in the kiddie pool, but I just went into the deep end when it came to the filmmaking process, you know? But again, I really was like at the hands of really experienced filmmakers and producers. And that was really the direction that they put me towards, was like, they were like, before we even touch of what filming is going to look like, we have to get all of the dirt out, have those conversations, in order to really make sure that the filming process is as efficient as possible. Because that's the thing with filmmaking, from what I've learned, is that it's really a race against the clock. And the last thing that you want is a 16 to 17 hour shoot day where nobody is getting paid, you know? At least that's from what I heard. And so I was like, okay, let's make sure that that doesn't happen, you know? And so the filming process for Smoke Breaks really only took over the span of 2 days, but it was 2 12-hour days, some of which was like the most chaotic yet most fun and loving experiences that I've really ever had, you know? I really, as a director, I wanted to create a space that was incredibly warm and really what ultimately felt like recess with a lot of people. And a big thing with that was I wanted to help create a budget that was extremely sufficient for people, and so that we were able to kind of be treated and feel a little bit more manicured and everything. And that was something that I got very lucky with. But that wouldn't have happened if it, again, wasn't conversations that were had in pre-production. This isn't even just between conversations that were had with Chris and Sierra, you know, the people who worked behind the scenes, but also my actors and my talent. And having that kind of rapport with them. Because the thing is that I also wanted it to really feel like I was working with my friends, with the people who were on set. And even though I didn't know really any of them prior to, I think I knew one person, Michelle Edge, beforehand. But even then, she was like a friendly acquaintance. But even then, I didn't get acquainted with her until maybe a year and a half ago when I first did Hidden Gems. That was when I got acquainted with her, but even then we were just like kind of friendly acquaintances of being like, hey BB, how's it going? Oh my god. Mwah. But before then I didn't know any of the actors prior to the conception of Smoke Breaks. And before we got on set, I wanted to have a very friendly familial rapport with all of my actors. And again, I use sort of the philosophy as just as much as this is my project, it is their project. I use that with the characters. Just as much as these characters were written from my brain, these are their characters to act out. And so we got very lucky with Liam Gardner and Jason Jamal Lagan, and I think you know her, Deandra Mendoza. She's a little creative in the creative scene in the Emerald Coast.
I might not.
She's a singer.
Unless...
She's like a little singer-songwriter. Girlie, she's over in Navarre.
If I see a face, I probably will recognize.
She's extremely talented. She says, she's like, I've never acted before, and she came into audition, and I was like, that's BS. Like, you're talented. You are this character through and through.
Yeah.
But all of us, I mean, prior to shooting, we had like 2 months worth of rehearsal where we sat and met like every other week for like an hour.
So you had a table reading?
Yeah, we had multiple table readings. So that was actually part of the prize package for the Del Shores Foundation. It was a live table reading in front of a live sort of studio audience, really.
Okay.
And it was a paid expense. It was like an all expenses paid trip to a southern city. The city was in Atlanta. And this reading happened this last February. And I remember I had already gotten Liam on the shoot because the story tells the story of a trans, like, gay male, and Liam was actually a former student of Del's.
Oh, wow.
And Del was like, I have the perfect guy for you. And it was so weird because and if you see him visually, I was imagining the character of Leon as sort of like this edgier guy, maybe with like a mullet, a couple piercings, tattoos, yada, yada, yada. I just kind of saw him as like a little bit more alternative looking. And then here we come. Liam Gardner comes in. He is a trans masculine gay actor who is not only phenomenal, but he also has piercings, tattoos, and a mullet.
Oh.
And I was like, this is weird. Okay.
Yeah.
And I kind of like texted Chris and Sierra, like literally when I first saw a look of him, I was like, he's our actor. And they were like, whoa, Will, don't jump the gun.
Oh, no.
But we did, like, we did a table reading for a scene that was eventually cut out. And he just like knocked it out of the park. And and this was 7 months before. Okay. This was like almost like we shot this past like late May.
Okay.
I had him done and locked in like November of last year.
Damn, that's really fast.
And even then we had conversations. Like I had met him 2 months prior to that because it was one of those things where I just took one look at him, and then it was like we were able to get a reading scheduled like 2 months later, and I just told him, I said, listen, dude, like, and he's based out in New Orleans. That was another thing that I wanted to make sure is that like people in this project were all from the South, like cast, crew, whatever. Everybody that was involved is from sort of a city in the South. And so I got in touch with him, and I was like, he's on lock. And then we obviously had 3 other characters that we had to cast for. And we had the table reading, and then we had the table reading in Atlanta. And in order to prep for the festival, we had readings of like this cast that was kind of in Atlanta. And including, because we knew that we wanted Liam to be a part of the table reading. So we were like, okay, we're going to have Liam be with these like Atlanta actors. And these Atlanta actors were like absolutely phenomenal. Shelby McCall, Isaac, and then, I got together with these 4 actors, and one of them was Jason Jamal Lagan. And it was one of those things where I felt really, really good. It wasn't one of those like, oh my God, he's like, it was, I felt really, really good about him for this table reading. And then we did the table reading, and I was like, okay, this is great. I come out a week later to Atlanta, and Liam and Jason's chemistry, for some reason, it was just magic on stage.
Oh,
I was like, because it was on a stage, so they had to kind of act bigger. it was just phenomenal. I just felt a really, really great energy. We ended up getting like a standing ovation for the table reading. It was really weird. The energy was just incredibly electric. And like all of the actors who were a part of that table reading, like I'm just so thankful for all of that because they created that. Yes, it was my writing, but them as actors like created the performance. And I knew instantly because I also had a really great verbal rapport with Jason. I literally texted Chris and Sarah. I was like, we have our Roger. And they were like, Will, like, you're now requiring, like, 2 out-of-town actors. We had to...
Which would be the budget issue.
Like, how... Like, what? But I just had this... It was, like, this instinct. I was like, it's... Like he's it. Like, I'm not going to be... If we have to push back in order to, you know, make money for budget, so be it. Like, I don't care. He's it. Obviously, I can't, and like it was so weird because I felt so bad because I would like praise Jason like all the time, and I was like, I really want you to be it, but I can't say, I can't, yeah. You know. And then lo and behold, it was like, I mean, one of our executive producers like somehow came through and like really believed in the project, and then we have like these really 2 great friends who have an Airbnb. Their names are Kyrie and Eric. Yeah, Kyrie and Eric. They actually own a local like catering business called Steel Pony Diner, but they also have an Airbnb. And they're like a gay couple and everything. And we had been friends just like through the bar scene. Yeah. And I was like really looking around to see if there's anybody that could potentially create logic because filmmaking is expensive, especially when you're getting out-of-town actors, because you can't have everybody just crashing on your couch. And I wanted this to also be a very comfortable experience for everybody, right. And I wanted Jason and Liam to feel extremely comfortable as actors and to feel like they were really well treated because of the fact that they were taking the time to make this thing happen. And so
you wanted to give them an experience.
Yeah, I wanted to give everybody an experience. And so, I mean, everything really just like miraculously just kind of like, it just kind of happened. It
fell into place.
It really all kind of fell into place. And that's like the biggest thing that I have to say with like filmmaking is that if you do the preparatory work, everything will inherently fall into place. And it was like literally Deandra and Michelle and Jason and Leah, like they all had such a fantastic like conversational chemistry with each other. It really, I mean, everybody was just so amazing with each other. And I mean, we still have like a little Smoke Breaks cast like group chat where we will just like sit and talk, and like I just absolutely adore all of them. And it's like I made like beyond just making something really, really good, right. I made some really, really good, amazing friends who helped me make something really, really good. And it was like, again, it was 2 days. It was seriously, again, like some of the most hectic things because I think with every film shoot, there's always stuff that is going to happen.
It's going to happen no matter what, and you have to be prepared for it.
Yeah, and there were like mistakes that were made and like all of those different things. And like Chris and Sierra sat down with me to kind of express those mistakes. And, you know, it was like, it was one, but at the same time, I mean, everybody in the room, and I'm not even really necessarily being hyperbolic, like everybody in the room of this project really just had a really strong morale and thought like, oh, we did something really, really good here. Because everybody was having fun. We're telling a story that I think people need to hear. And I believe that it's a story that needs to be told. And again, like there was just such a natural rapport with pretty much everyone. I think that like in order, like I don't necessarily think there is a way to kind of create chemistry. It's just there or it's not. Yeah. And that sounds a little bit cynical, but that's really what was felt. Like, cause it was very much a risk because all 4 of these actors lived in completely different places. I mean, Deandra lived in Destin, and the closest person that she could connect with to do rehearsals is probably Michelle. But it was very much like having that physical chemistry test was very much a bit of a roll of the dice. I mean, Jason and Liam had the table reading prior, but they didn't, you know, because there are some scenes where they are a little bit more physical with each other. They didn't have like rehearsal of doing that. It was very much like we are doing it on the fly, you know? And so that's where I say like chemistry can't naturally. It's
You just
either
can't
there.
you can't recreate it.
Yeah, you just can't
Yeah.
recreate it. And what these actors like really created was something incredibly special. And I'm
Right.
just so entirely grateful for them, because as much as they can say like, oh my God, like I'm a good director, because they've said that, you know, it's really them that made the project what it is.
Actually, that's a great segue because I actually wanted to ask specifically the standing ovation. That had to be another sign of validation to your imposter. Please tell me it did not get worse. Please tell
Well,
me.
no, I just cried. Like that
Really?
was
Yeah.
like it was like, I think that was the moment where I was like, okay, I knew that I had a really good script when I got told that I was the winner, right? Great script. Cool. Great. Second part is, because when you are the director of a budgeted project and everything, you can't really hire a casting director.
Yes.
So you kind of are your own casting director and everything. And the casting really was like all done by this guy named Chad Dyer and Emerson. Emerson was very much like a huge part of it in really finding these
Thank you, you
actors.
too.
So I was like, okay, like seeing these 4 or 5, because we also had a 5th guy named Isaac who did the narration for all of it. He did such a great job at like really narrating what the screenplay really was. I thought, okay, like this is a script that also sounds great or sounds decently, you know, through people's voices, you know, and how it, like these jokes land, these, you know, monologues land. Okay, that was like another feeling of validation. It wasn't like oh my God, this is going to be a great film. It was just further validation of, okay, what I wrote down was decent. It was good. It was like cool, great. And I gave something that these actors could work with. And that is like, I really, again, like my biggest thing is I never wanted to kind of get all the way up in my own head and up my own ass. I just didn't want to do either of those.
Okay.
So I really tried to be in the present, and I was like, okay, I have something good that these actors can work with that is solid, you know, and it gave a standing ovation, and I was just emotional because of the positive response that it received. I didn't think of myself like, oh my God, this is such a great project. Oh my God, this is such like,
Right.
oh my God, I'm a bad actor or I'm a bad writer getting, I just thought this is something good. And, I mean, Dell and Emerson also said, like, this is something good. And the people who are on the board of the Del Shores Foundation, they really said, they were like, you've got something good. And I really try to keep it in the present of at this festival. Okay, it is a great table reading. It is a great table reading on a stage in front of these people. Now, whether that's going to be portrayed well on screen, who the fuck knows? I don't know. That's only going to be told once we're behind the camera lens and we see it play through.
Okay.
And then thankfully, these actors are just phenomenal. Liam Gardner is a fantastic actor, and I think that this isn't to sound hyperbolic or anything, but I think that he has the potential, even though he is like literally from New Orleans and everything, and he's not in LA or anything like that. I think with just how well he was able to portray this character of Leon, he has the potential of being a voice for this queer generation of transmasculine actors. And that was really what I wanted to provide him with the potential of having strong representation that he felt comfortable with.
Okay. How does it feel for you as someone who's literally taking the responsibility of showing that message that might or will represent that community? How does it feel to have that ability to finally do that? And how are you taking great care to make sure that it comes across the right way?
So it really takes like consultants, people who are within that demographic, right?
Okay.
So I thankfully am like very much involved with the local queer community in Pensacola. So I did have 2 or 3 transmasculine individuals who spoke with me, read the script, and I thought like, okay, is this an appropriate story to tell? You know, are you comfortable with a cisgender gay guy telling this kind of story?
Okay.
And I sat and I talked with them. I talked with their concerns and everything. I even talked to Liam himself of like things that can be improved, because again, I wanted to give him the power of like, just as much as this is my script, this is your story. If there is something that you don't feel comfortable saying, if this is like something that you don't feel comfortable doing, please let me know, because a script can always be adjusted. There was nothing in that script that I thought like, oh my God, this is going to make or break, like whatever, right? I came in it with a very yes and approach. Like, okay, you don't feel comfortable with that? Fine. All right, cool. Let's make adjustments. And it was really through finding consultants of the demographics that I was like really speaking to. I mean, even with the character of Cece who Deandra played, I spoke with a couple of Latina, like she's a Puerto Rican woman. I spoke with like a couple of Latina women who, fit that kind of demographic. And I said, do you feel comfortable with me kind of portraying this woman like this and everything? And, they very much were like, holy shit, we love this character. And I think it's just one of those things where it's important to be mindful of the people that you're representing in all capacities. I think like if it is a woman, showing a man who fits a certain stereotype, to consult with men who maybe fit into that stereotype. I think if it's a, straight guy telling a female story, hey, is this something that, like, do you respond well to this story? Do you understand my intention with it? And it comes down to also having internal conversations of what is your intention with these kinds of things. And, was this a story that I felt comfortable with? And I didn't feel comfortable with putting this story on screen until I spoke with these trans consultants.
That's actually really, I think that's a lot of considerations that many people should start taking in, especially when dealing with topics like this and also representing all kinds of communities, race, and ethnicities.
Yes.
But it's not often talked about because like, we all want to do like, oh, there's going to be a great film. It's going to be.
You just want to make it.
Yes.
You just want to make it. But it's like, I mean, if I were to sit here like and create this Asian character who is just completely inaccurate or offensive, of like Asian stereotypes and everything, and I were to just put it out, I mean, that's just not being a considerate person, because that's not my story to tell.
Yeah.
Yes, I can yes, you can write. I do believe that there are people of people of different demographics that can tell different stories of people who. But I think it's really important of like including the people who represent those characters in the conversation. They don't necessarily have to be in the writer's room, but at least be like, how do you feel about this character being portrayed? Take a look, do just a brief run through of this script. How do you feel about this joke? How do you feel about this? And that was really kind of the approach that I had, because I don't I want to uplift the trans community as much as the trans community has uplifted me. And that was really how I felt, is I felt like I had a service to provide, because I was given this opportunity of telling a trans story, but I wanted to do it in the most respectful way possible.
Sometimes when you do it in a way that's very distasteful, it does you a major disservice, especially as a creator. You have the power to represent, whereas most people might not have the same opportunities as you do. Having that ability to create a specific message that literally accurately represents everybody, it's like an egg. You have to take great care to make sure you don't drop it. Otherwise,
at the same time, you're just gonna have a room full of yolk, and what's that gonna do for people, And that's the thing. When you said it's a disservice, I think it's a disservice to the writer itself from telling a better story.
Yeah.
Because if you're sitting there relying on your own artistic point of view, I'm sorry, your opinion or your perspective ain't ish. It takes a village, really, and it takes a multitude of different perspectives. And so, yes, I could have sat here and gone off the first draft or done certain things and yada yada yada, but it would have done a disservice for me, because I would have lacked the conversations I have in my brain now if I just went off, of my own perspective. Thankfully, I didn't necessarily have to change much of the script, really, because I really tried to be mindful initially and everything. And it received a very strong response from the trans consultants that I did speak with, but I would have done myself a disservice just even as a human by not allowing myself to have those conversations in the first place. Because again, I thought in my head, I really want to be as respectful as I can to the trans and queer community as a whole. So let's take the proper precautions. And I mean, again, if it's not my story to tell, it's not my story to tell. And if the trans community didn't feel comfortable with me telling it, I'm sorry, I wouldn't have. But once I received sort of the okay, I was like, okay, now we can move forward.
Again, thank you so much for sharing a lot of that. And second, that something thinks you actually is great. You're doing great with the segues. The segues is with the screenwriting. Oftentimes when we're writing certain scenes, we get married to it. Like, no, this should not. I love about that what you said when you made sure that each scene is not the make or break. Not a lot of screenwriters will, or at least from what I know, it's just like, no, if this gets removed, oh my gosh, everything's gone. So with the fact that you took that approach and make sure that not all of the scenes are make break, can you describe some of the scenes that had to be taken out and it was so
Oh my God, yeah.
painful?
So there was like this one particular scene, and this was a conversation that like literally me, Dylan, and Emerson had. Okay, so like there was, this project itself, there's sex in it. Just straight up saying that. Okay, there's sex in it. And there's sex in it, but so the entire project itself, it talks about the idea of unconditional love within unconventional circumstances. Okay, so there is and really what that looks like. So when me, Chris, and Sarah were kind of like talking about these certain things, we're like, okay, we had this idea of like having a fight scene that kind of challenges these two characters' unconditional love for each other. And it was like after the like post-sex high and everything, and after the plot twist that I'm not going to name or spoil, but it was going to be this huge, like dramatic, like fight scene of like, it was like gonna be a marriage story kind of thing.
Oh,
right?
like the
It was
Adam
like
Driver?
this very intense, like you know
Adam
that one fight scene was
Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson.
That one, like you're such a dick. That thing. So it was gonna be like I mean, I still kind of have this scene in my back pocket, you know, because I think that the scene in and of itself is very, very beautiful. But we were talking with Elle, and they said, you're inherently telling a love story. Why are you ending it with these hurt, sore feelings, really?
Okay.
And it was difficult because I fell in love with this like fight scene so much. That was this particular scene was the scene that I auditioned Liam with, because I think that fight scenes are the greatest, like make or break. Like, and this is just my opinion as an amateur filmmaker. Are a really great tell of somebody's acting ability, because I mean, fight scenes can get really cringy really quickly. You've seen them. It's like, you know, you've seen really, really bad fight scenes. And Liam knocked it out of the park. I was like, there's no, like, oh my God, I need this thing to happen. It also, like, revealed, like, transphobia within the queer community, like, all of these topics of conversation. I fell in love. And, you know, me, Chris, and Sierra all fell in love. But this was something, it didn't, with the time that we had, it just didn't add to the story, and it didn't add to the message. It actually tainted the message that we were trying to tell.
Because of the negative
because of the negative connotation that it inherently had, you know? And
what would you have done to modify it so that it wouldn't meet within the message that you're actually trying to tell? What would you have done to change it? Or there was no other way around it?
Like, it just wasn't right with the story that we were trying to tell.
Okay.
I think I would have just not made it a short film and a feature instead, you know, because I do believe that there is a I do believe that there is inherently like a place for this particular scene and for this particular fight scene, but I just don't think that this particular project, with the amount of time that we have, it's not necessarily the most appropriate, because one of the characters, again, like, I mean, I've fallen so deeply in love with and everything like that, it would have created a negative viewpoint from the audience.
And that's not what you want to do, especially with the community that you're representing.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was like really the biggest thing is, again, this thing is our baby, and sometimes you've got to kill further babies. You know, that are
Danny
made
said
from
the
it.
exact same thing.
Yeah, like that was like I mean, that's a huge. That was like a huge, and that was like a big thing that Dal kind of enforced me, and he told me himself. He said, like, I love this scene in of itself. Like, it really is, but I just don't think it's necessarily the
How
right
hard
fit.
was it for you to hear that?
It was hard, but at the same time, I was understanding of it. It wasn't like this deep tragedy, like, oh my God, because I still have it in a separate Google Doc.
Right.
It's there. It's just a not right now kind of situation. And that's really how it is. And that's how, and the biggest thing that I kind of want to emphasize is that with the way that screenwriting is, I think, again, there are some people that are so strict on, you said, that are very strict on what this script is.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily what life is like. And I think that with life, it's a very yes and approach. And I think that people should have a very yes and approach to their screenwriting as well. You know, be open to pretty much anything. I mean, that was like a big lesson that I took from, I'm such a Gerwig stan, but like Gerwig literally has like a 300-page document because she just lets every single idea happen. And part of the yes and process is cutting out which ones don't fit. And that was really what I did. I think I had like 3 total scenes I cut from the project altogether because of the fact that they just skewed all the way from the overall messaging from the story.
That's really hard because even as someone from a position where you are the one that you create everything, it's just really hard to not get your personal feelings in the way of the overall picture, the community that you're trying to represent.
Right.
But to get the personal feelings, just have that compartmentalized, it's so difficult because when a project becomes bigger than you imagine, it becomes bigger. It morphs into this message that you know is going to impact in a large community, and it no longer is about your personal gain that you would get from that project. That's when you have to start to learn how to make sure that you set a boundary for yourself in the project as far as setting your personal feelings and the people that you're trying to represent.
Yeah,
that's really hard.
Absolutely. And I think also, I mean, at the same time, I mean, I wasn't necessarily even thinking about it from my own point of view or the audience's point of view. I was really thinking about it from the point of view of the characters. Does this make sense for this character to kind of react the way that they're doing, to react the way that they are? You know, does it make you know? It was one of those things where I the best way that I could kind of describe what cutting this particular scene out was like. We already had a fully colored picture from a coloring book, right?
Yes.
I thought, oh, wow, here is a great thing to add to this already completed picture. So I drew something along the tracing of this additional picture on a loose leaf sheet of paper, and I colored it in, and it fit exactly perfectly. But again, it's an additional, it's not the completed project. And it was one of those things I already had the soul of the project. I already had the soul of the film, but I wanted to create more, but sometimes less is more.
Yes.
And sometimes,
That's
again,
so damn hard.
You can have so many ideas, but it's like, where is the thread? And we had the thread, but then it was like with this additional scene, it started to become knotted and it started to become a little discombobulated, you know? And again, it's a very beautiful scene. I think that if there was like a bigger canvas for us to work, that thread easily could have become no longer knotted.
Yeah.
But we don't have that space given the span of a short film. And that was really kind of how we settled on certain things. It's like, does this properly reflect the story that we're just trying to tell? And it just didn't. There was a slight misalignment. And I believe that everything inherently just had to kind of properly fit.
So now we're going to pivot back from the screenwriting. Now we're going to put yourself in the shoe of a director. Keep in mind, people, this is Will's I think that's how you say directorial debut. I have speech impediment. Don't shit on me for that, okay? That is now your first directorial. His first project. I'm just going to relegate to that term. Your first project as a director. How does it feel to now finally take the reins of someone that is creating the scene from watching things go from paper all the way to in person? What was that experience like for you?
It was a very emotional experience, honestly. I didn't realize. So one of the biggest things that like Chris and Sierra really critiqued me about, and this is something that I fully believe that constructive criticism is like a must when it comes to the creative process, when it comes to the directorial process. They pretty much said that like one of the biggest things that I had was like I had so much anxiety to the project that it kind of came across as like over boastfulness. But a lot of it came from just the fact of like, oh my God, this is the first time that when it came to being a director, I thought I had to be the big man in charge. I thought this is my and this is something that was like, I came at it from a viewpoint of overcompensation when I was initially going into it. I thought I had to have it all figured out. I thought I had to answer every single question. I thought I had to answer every single thing. I thought I had to be the man with the iron fist. Turns out, being a director, it's a lot more passive of a role than I think a lot of people give credit for. Really, and this is just my perspective as a director, you are to serve as the eyes of the audience, the eyes and ears of the audience, of the people watching the project. You're not necessarily supposed to stay, and yes, you could give points of view when it comes to, certain things and how things should be, choreographed and da-da-da-da-da-da. But ultimately, your job is to serve as the eyes and ears of the audience, seeing, does this look good? Do you like the way that certain things are moving and everything? And a lot of the directorial process, I think, again, happens before the actual shoot. It's understanding the micro expressions that the characters are giving on screen with your actors in rehearsal. That was one thing that I very much emphasized because I knew how to do a rehearsal. I didn't know how to do a film set. So I very much was like, let's have 2 months of rehearsal beforehand, so that we can go over these certain things. When it came to actually being a director, I was like literally, I was just like completely frazzled because this was a complete different arena. Again, I was somebody who needed to be in the kiddie pool, who went and jumped off the deep end with no floaties. And obviously, like, I had floaties that were Chris and Sierra, like they were my lifeguards, and they are seriously the best lifeguards in the entire world. But at the same time, again, I had no experience. I had no floaties for experience, and of even just. I had very little experience of just being on a set in general. I didn't fully understand the rhythm of certain things. And, but at the end of the day, despite all of these like things I'm kind of saying negatively about myself, it was the most fun experience that I'd ever had because ultimately I was just creating art with my friends. And I think that's really the approach that I think every director should have is you're literally just getting played. You're getting paid to play pretend. Sometimes you're not getting paid, but ultimately, you're just playing pretend with a bunch of friends.
I think
you're making art.
You really got to give yourself more credit than you think because people that don't push themselves in an environment where they're extremely uncomfortable and they feel like they're plateauing and they feel like they're not learning. I think if you had stayed in the same spot before, by next year, would you have been happy with yourself?
Oh my God, no. I would have like hated myself and I would have been like, girly, why didn't you do that? Like,
exactly.
What? No, and I definitely do give myself like a lot of credit. Like, I can say I did something really, really hard and it was,
yes.
And like, that is something that I'm proud of. I'm so proud of like really the work that we created as a team, what I did as a director. I'm genuinely very proud of all of it. But at the same time, I also think it's important to really be critical of like I come at things from a growth mindset of like how can I move forward from all of this, like what could I have done better, and everything, and that happens with every single project, and so like I really try to look at things from both points of view. I try to look at things from a viewpoint of growth, but I also look at things, I did something that was like really hard and it was like so much fun, and that is like something that I can't trade for the world. I can't, like, we literally had the best crew on, like, granted, again, it was my first film set directing, but like everybody on the crew was like absolutely amazing, from like Eric Mitro to like Fabio of Fresco Recording. Like every single, like, the thing that I loved so much was about this directing process is, again, I was just working with people that I loved and adored as people. That was a thing that I very much enforced to Chris and Sierra, because Sierra was like our leading producer. She was the person that was basically gathering, and like
Right.
her and Chris both were the people that were gathering, and the people that were working on this project. I told them, I said, I only want to work with people who I'm previously acquainted with and who I genuinely like as people. And they did that. And that's really what this project, really what this like directorial debut came about, like turned into was, it was a directorial debut where I got to make a really, really cool film with other my friends. And that is like the greatest achievement that I probably could have asked for as my first time directing.
That's gonna be the first one that you're gonna attain down this path. Keep in mind, there's gonna be better and bigger things in your horizon. So this is the first step towards that, and that's something to be proud of. Seriously.
The only thing that like would have made it better was like if my friend Danny was there, but like there were external circumstances.
But you're coming here. Smoke break 2.
Yeah, like smoke break 2. Danny is on the project because again he's been like my creative therapist throughout this entire process. He's just been my rock throughout everything. And that's the only thing that I could have said like probably would have made this project better. Is like if my bestie was there. Really.
Dan, if you're watching this.
Other than that, I was hanging out with all of my other besties at the same time. And it was just like awesome. I mean, me and like Liam and Jason and Michelle and Deandra as like talent and everything, we just like get on like we're friends. And me and Chris and Sierra, we get on like we're friends. And I just, as much as they've become mentors for me, they've become like really just great friends. And that's the biggest achievement that I kind of gained from this. Yes, like I always say like the achievements are gonna come when they come, but the relationships that I not only had but I cultivated through this process is really just the real reward.
Well, I think I want to add to that. All the achievements that you accomplished won't feel meaningless if you don't even have the people to share it with.
Right.
And they were there.
We're having like we're so I think it's like kind of official. I don't know if I could like say if you say it like what it's like basically like kind of a done deal, but we've anticipated it premiering over at Stand Film Festival in Pensacola, like our LGBTQ film festival, and that's an achievement in of itself of like getting into a film festival. But like it's the fact that I get to sit and celebrate this because I've pretty much told like Jason, Liam, and like the entire cast, I said like you guys are coming out and we're celebrating you guys. That is what I'm like excited for, is like seeing all of my friends again all in one place, because it's very, sometimes when it comes to creative projects, the times that you get to sit and work with your friends, they come few and far between. And when you have those special moments, it's like fantastic. And it's like, we have like 700 photos and like Hannah Day Greg, like the photographer, right? She's our BTS photographer. She and I were friends, like even prior to all of that. And, I asked her, I was like, do you want to come onto this project? She's like, of course. And when she was like sitting here taking pictures, it was like, again, she works over East Hill Pizza in Pensacola, but it was like I was sitting here like hanging out with her at the pizza shop. And that's what the entire process was like. And when it comes to like my directorial debut, it's like I can never really look at things from like an achievement base, but I look at things of like, the biggest reward was just my friends. That's it. And like also the idea of being able to provide an opportunity for my friends.
Oh, that is a great feeling in it by itself.
That was like a big thing, was like I have this, like I was given this opportunity of being in a position of power, of being able to kind of employ people and help pay their rent. And rent is like probably the biggest struggle that everybody has, but like that was an amazing thing. That was a big thing that I very much enforced, was that everybody on this project was going to get paid at least something. And that was very much a big thing that me, Chris, and Sierra talked about. That was like part of the struggles of the budget, was like, how are we going to be able to pay everybody? But we ended up killing it. and we ended up getting to it. But yeah, I mean, and I had like a friend who like had never even been on a film set before, Andrea Romano. She had never been on a film set before, and I just like I felt this need. I was like, she needs to be on the project. She needs to be on the project, and I didn't know how. She kind of played like a PA, like hair assistant kind of role, and it filled my heart of just being able to provide her with that kind of experience, you know, because that was something that she was never really given prior, but I felt like she kind of deserved because she is like such a sweet and amazing personality to be around. And I was like, of course, like she is my hairstylist. So I was like, I want her to be a part of something. And when we were able to kind of nook and cranny the budget a little bit and figure out something, you know, it was amazing. And I think that was really the real reward, was how much I was able to give, and not necessarily what I was able to really receive. Because I've been this project, I've received so much in creative.
And you just want to give back.
Yeah, and that's like my biggest goal, is like just to, as much as I receive, I want to give equally as much of that energy, and I feel like I did that with this project.
A friend of mine in Nashville told me this. With people, well, actually, if you want to go fast in whatever it is that you do it alone. But if you want to go farther, you do it with people.
Right.
And that's exactly what it sounds like happened to you. And that's, I think, and also try not to lose that caregiving, because the amount of credit that you just gave to the people that worked on your project is not something that's always talked about, because people at a higher position, when they're further in the career, they don't always often give credit to the people that really truly worked, because it's not, and most of them just walk like, yeah, I did this. Yeah, that's right. Motherfuckers, I did this shit. No, they forget. And they get it up to their head that it's also the team. So
it takes a village.
Yes. So don't lose that. If you keep going on this path of the director, don't lose that part.
Well, no, and that was like a big thing, is I was like, if I ever become like a douche canoe, like shoot me, please. Because like, no, I mean, seriously. And that was just like that was the biggest thing that I very much tried to not portray, was like, because again, I think like there are just sometimes where like, you know, you get a little power hungry a little bit, you know, you get a little bit of a power trip and everything,
a little bit, well.
You know, and that's really what I try to do, is I want to give as much credit as I can, because none of this would have happened if like Liam didn't like the script and he didn't want to be a part of it. This wouldn't have happened if like Jason didn't want to be a part of the project, you know? I mean, that's just how it is. Like, this wouldn't have happened if like Chris and Sierra didn't decide, because they're busy and booked. Like, they have a whole production company that is booked throughout the year. Damn. They are constantly on film shoots. Before the film set, like the film shooting, Chris literally did like a full week trip in the Middle East, like a film shoot in the Middle East. Damn. Literally got off a plane, slept for like 24 hours, and then shot Smoke Breaks. Like, it was Sierra was doing Smoke Breaks while she was also like doing full rehearsals for Rent, while she was also working as her full-time job as the producer for Calliope Films. These people have full-time jobs, and they still devoted the 2 12-hour days of this project that wasn't going to pay them that much. And the fact that they took their time and their energy, and they believed in the story that much, and they believed in my vision as a creative, I'm so like, none of it would have happened if they didn't believe in it. Yeah. And they didn't make those kinds of sacrifices. So obviously, like, you have to sit and give credit when credit is due. And the same thing goes for like our head hairstylist, Nick Martin. I mean, he's a full like working hairstylist and everything, and he came in on his day off, you know, like to do a 12-hour shoot. He literally went into work the very next day.
Oh my gosh.
You know, so many of these people took time out of their lives to make this project happen. And so obviously I'm going to sit there. Yes, I'm the director. Yes, I'm the writer. Yes, I'm all of this. I get it. But it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the people that took the time out of their day to make this thing happen. It took a lot of ingenuity off of a lot of people's schedules and a lot of people's time and energy to really make this project for what it is.
I mean, that goes to show that the dedication towards your project, it just goes to show that you really do have something important. I think that's a great... Dude, that's another sign of... Now, we're almost out of time. I'm so sorry, guys. This has been a great podcast episode.
Absolutely.
But I do want to wrap up with a few questions here. Now, going into post, the rough cut, now that you've seen it, what does it finally feel like? Now that you're almost...
We're almost there.
You're Mount Everest. This is your Mount Everest.
Right.
You're about to... No. Fuck Mount Everest.
It's my Machu Picchu right now.
No, not even Mount Everest. This is literally... You're about to take the first step to plant your foot into the moon. This is your moon.
Oh my God.
And you're going to say one giant small film. One... I don't know how to... But in that analogy, though, now that you've seen everything, you've gone through the hardships... The achievements, the sacrifices, what does it look like for you now at this post-production stage?
I just see possibility.
Okay.
Really, that's like the biggest thing. I've already been rewarded so much just, in regards to my soul and everything. And,
Okay.
On like a very spiritual level, this has been a very spiritual process for me, and it's been a very huge moment for self-discovery. I just, I ultimately just see... an opportunity to, potentially create more and uplift more people. Because that's really where I come at it when it comes to my artistic point of view is I just really want to uplift more people and helping fulfill their creative journeys just as much as Chris and Sierra and Dylan and Emerson have helped fulfill mine. I don't know. I mean, I have a couple of other things like kind of in the works really that's really exciting. I don't know if I should spoil this now, but fuck it, whatever. We have a really, really cool, amazing person that is going to be releasing a single related to the film. I can't necessarily say who, but they are a local little indie artist who I've just grown to love and adore. And when I heard their voice for the first time, I knew that they were the voice for this project. And I just know that they're really going to do this project justice. Whether it's in the film or not, that comes down to the final edit, really. But
has it been color graded?
Sorry?
Has it been color graded and added with the sounds? Where is it at?
So it really hasn't been color graded. In regards to the rough cut,
yes.
It was really just a feeling of affirmation. Okay. It was I was so nervous because I was like, oh my God, this movie could be so bad. I don't want it to be. I don't think it is. But, there's always that possibility of things happening. But it solidified of like this calm feeling of like, we've got something good. Okay. It wasn't this like super grandiose feeling. It was just like, all right.
Okay.
We got like another thing checked out. And now, I mean, we're still in the midst of editing it, and we have like so many creative ideas of how we want to tell this story, really. And it's really just, I mean, that's really kind of how I see it. We've already kind of submitted it to a couple of film festivals because they've seen the rough cut and they want to see more of it.
Okay.
It's just a feeling of calm excitement. To summarize it, really.
And it's gotta be.
I'm not like, oh my god, like
Does it almost have this sense of feeling where it's like anticlimactic? It's like, huh?
Yeah, like it feels surreal in a sense of like, oh wow, it's happening.
Yeah.
But it also feels. Like, I think in the beginning of this entire process, it felt inappropriate because I didn't believe in myself.
Okay.
But because of all of these kinds of experiences, I'm like, okay, great, awesome, cool. This is really, really great. And I just hope that people like this project. That's really my thing, is I hope that it leaves a positive impact on people. I hope that people feel inspired to create more art. And I think also I want people to get a sense of the ingenuity that the Gulf Coast film scene has to offer. That is another thing. Everybody that's involved with this project is from the Gulf Coast and from the South in some capacity, really. I think, like, again, Liam and Jason are our two actors, but Jason is from Atlanta. Liam is from New Orleans. They're both from the South, and I really just want to show what the Southern film scene has to offer.
I think that's a great goal to have in mind because this area, we need help. No tax
There's
exemptions.
there's so much talent here. There's so much talent here. So please, to our local governments, please give us tax incentives because stuff is being made.
It's so important. They don't really recognize that.
We could win a couple of Emmys.
Yeah. Well, please send some money, please. That'd be great.
You know, and that was like the thing is,
Yeah.
this was just an opportunity for me to show the cool ish that Pensacola's got to offer.
Yeah.
All the locations that we have are like local locations and they're extremely beautiful. And it's like, I can't wait for you to see really what this film looks like because I've grown just such a love for not only this project, but also the places around me, you know, and,
People get caught up in the idea that you have to be somewhere else. I'm in that. I struggle with
like,
that.
I mean, I think everybody does. I think everybody does. But I think, like, right now, I mean, as long as you, like, I think those opportunities come when they come. I always think of, like, my friend Roderick, who, like, literally just...
Are you talking about the one who moved to ATO?
To Atlanta? Yeah, I think of him because
yeah.
literally, like, he moved to Atlanta just completely on a whim because he had to, because he, like, him and his family got, like, kicked out of his house and everything, and he somehow got a roommate within the span of, like, 3 days and stuff, and he got, like, it was just all on a whim for him, and I think, like, everybody's going to have their gust of wind to potentially move somewhere else, but I think that if you have the opportunity, really dig yourself deep and make something where you're at because it is possible. I just don't necessarily think people think it is possible, but it really is. There's people that want to see stuff by local filmmakers, and there's people that want to support those weird artists, creative types really here. It's just a matter of really finding them and finding those people who want to support us.
Damn it.
But there are, you know.
It is so hard. Actually, that's why I wanted to create this platform with Hidden Recording beyond just podcast. Eventually, people like you will find other. You know that saying, whoever you surround yourself with will also attract the people that you want to be around with. That's what I want to do with this podcast.
Well, you are doing it because you are taking the time to, you know, sit here and interview. You're doing the work in of itself, and that is important, and that is beautiful. Just no, really. You're giving people a camera to sit. You are giving people the opportunity to sit behind a camera and tell their story, and that's beautiful and that's impactful in of itself. You know, you yourself have the potential of really exposing people to what the South and the Gulf Coast have to offer because you take the time to do this.
That means a lot. Thank you.
No, really. And you are like such a phenomenal interviewer. That is something that I have to say. Like, I've talked with a multitude of people, and it's one of those things where I mean, just as you said that I don't necessarily give myself enough credit, you don't give yourself enough credit, you know. I like really, and I think like, I mean, who knows? Like maybe down the line, if I like do, you know, make more projects, everything, there's more creatives that I can send over to you, you know, and be like, hey, you should interview this person because they are totally in the up and coming or whatever. And I don't know. I don't know. I'm just thinking kind of in hyperbole right now, but I think that this podcast is a really, really, really cool thing. And I think that you're doing a lot of cool, really good work.
Same thing with you. You're doing wonderful. Well, I have so many other questions, but you know what, guys? Just like Smoke Breaks 2 podcast, we're gonna do a sequel to this episode. Are you up for that?
Let's do it. We can do a little like project like after.
When is that film coming out?
So
when should people
we
expect
are
that?
premiering it to the public. The anticipated date, obviously things might be subject to change and everything, but the anticipated date is October 5th at of this year at Stand Film Festival over in Pensacola, Florida at the Pensacola Little Theater. The really amazing thing about this particular film festival is that they make sure that it's extremely accessible to everyone. So it is a free film festival to attend. All 3 days that it kind of happens and is open to the general public. It's completely free. You can literally sit and watch a whole bunch of movies for free. Like, over the and they, you know, yes, it very much targets like LGBTQ cinema and everything like that, but really it's a space for pretty much everybody. Anybody is welcome to it. And so the premiere of the film is anticipated to be October 5th of this upcoming year.
October. Remember that, people.
October 5th, 2024. And again, it's free. It's free.
The only cost is you just give your time.
And there
In
will
a good
likely
way.
be snacks and drinks.
no alcohol.
I mean, there is a bar at the theater. Like,
Don't get drunk.
I've been served a Pinot Grigio over there, okay? If you're 21 and up, there will be drinks. But
just be responsible.
yeah, be responsible. Uber home.
Now, now with a few questions.
Uh-huh.
You kind of answered this already, but what's the next chapter for you?
So the next chapter for me, I think right now, is kind of going through the film festival circuit with smoke breaks. I have hopes, I have deep hopes to potentially expand the story, whether it's through the lens of a feature film or a TV series. I've written a couple of scripts that kind of expand on the love story of the characters of Leon and Roger, but just because those characters don't know how to shut the fuck up. Really, like, these two characters, they know how to keep on talking, really. In regards to the film world, that's kind of where I'm at, is really just kind of riding the wave of the festival circuit to see if people like it, you know, and everything. And if things continue to expand, yeah, I'm so open to the possibility of like potentially turning it into a series or a feature film. Either format I can work with.
Okay.
Really, just give me the money and I'll do it. And, you know, in regards to like other creative stuff, I mean, continuing to train in MMA because that very much has a positive impact on my filmmaking perspective. Weirdly enough, you don't know how mixed martial arts really has an effect on it, but it does.
Okay.
Maybe that's something we can say, like dive deeper into the you know, sequel episode. And then continuing to work as a.
Now that you've gone through the process, because this has to be some sort of therapy for you too, because it's shown you different experiences that you had to learn from other people on top of what you experience. As a person going forward, what can you say about yourself that you're so proud of now?
I'm just genuinely proud of the fact that I made something really, really cool.
Good.
I think one thing that I can say, and that maybe other people attest to, is that I have a pretty strong work ethic. I think this project kind of proved that, just because, and I think originally it stemmed from anxiety of like, oh my God, if I don't get this done, But I think really I have a sense of grit, and if I have a goal, I'll do everything and anything in my power to really make sure it gets done. I think that's kind of proven that's really proved itself over time, and I think that this project is sort of a culmination and really a visual depiction of that work ethic, because a lot of hours went into it, and a lot of time and a lot of care and a lot of
sacrifices too. Now, was there anything that I have not given you an opportunity to talk about, to speak about?
No, I mean, I think everything, we've really covered everything.
Well, on that note, what is one thing what is the message that you want to leave for this episode to the people, specifically those that have struggled with their identity and especially expressing that through creative projects like what you're doing now? What would you say to them now?
I think if you got a story to tell, then tell it. Really. No, seriously, write it down, whether it's on again, whether it's in a Google Doc, whether it's on a screenwriting software, whether it's through a TikTok. If you have a perspective that needs to be told, there is no reason why you shouldn't tell it. Really. That's what I firmly believe, because there is going to be, like, whether you believe that it's going to resonate with people or not, it will. And there will be somebody that kind of finds connection with it in some capacity. I mean, all of us have a complete different story to tell, really. Not all of us are the same. I think the human experience is very nuanced. And so if you are a young creative who is maybe struggling with their identity in any capacity, just tell it. Like, seriously. I mean, there's no reason not to. Again, I came into this wanting to be a novelist, and I would just write these stories for myself. And I just happened to have gotten lucky to have a person who was in a position to see my work, really. The other thing is like make friends with your creative community. There are some creative scenes that I've been to and it's very cutthroat and that's so unnecessary. I think if you come at things from a very communal energy and if you come at things from a place of let's just be there for each other, you're gonna get cool shit done. Because that's what happened. This project is the culmination of that communal energy that we've all felt towards each other. And I think specifically within the South, that's really what it takes. I think it takes a lot of grit. It takes a lot of conversation. And I think it just takes a lot of time behind the computer of sitting and getting your thoughts out. At least that's what happened for me.
I just have to say, I can't get over the first thing that you said was conversations. Throughout the entire interview, that message stuck with me so much.
Well, and that was like what inspired the title of Smoke Breaks in the first place, was because the story itself was inspired over my oldest sister is a hairstylist, right? And she's a smoker, and whenever she was like working on her client's hair or anytime that she was taking lunch break, she would always go out and smoke cigarettes. And I found there was like such a weird intimacy that was there whenever people would sit and talk over a smoke break. She would sit and make friends with like the homeless people on the street and they would tell her their life story. She would sit there and tell talk about the gossip with her coworkers and everything. And I was like, well, what is a story that I can tell that is kind of representative of that? Because my sister found extremely deep connections through something that could inherently kill her. And I thought that was so interesting. And creatively fulfilling. And so it all stemmed, like, yes, we talk about conversations and the importance of conversations. And it was through those conversations that my sister would have that inspired all of this. And
it's so mundane and so common, but there's so much message to it depending on who, like you just took that mundane and so common behavior and turned it to something much more meaningful.
Yeah.
And that's so beautiful.
It was something that was inherently meaningful for me because, I mean, when my father, again, this goes back to like the trauma, right? Like when my father just passed away, when we were going through all of this chaotic turmoil or emotional turmoil, my sister would sit and she would smoke her cigarette. I would talk to her about anything and everything, whether it was the Neopets that I had just bought on my computer or if it was like the kids that were bullying me at school. She was sitting there and she gave me the space to have that conversation. And I thought sometimes the most life-changing experiences happen because of a smoke break. There would be times when like a best friend of hers would tell her that she just got engaged over the smoke break. There would be times where my sister would hear from her client that her child just died.
Oh, man.
Like all of these things, but it would happen over something so mundane. Or there would be times where my sister would be given a job opportunity over a smoke break. Something that would completely change her life. Again, something that we look at something is so mundane, but it's so deeply personal.
I think you could not have chosen the perfect title of that film, of this film.
You'll see more what I mean when you actually see the film. Like
again, October what?
October 5th.
October what?
October 5th.
All right. Now, where can people find you?
Okay, so as I said in the beginning of this podcast episode, I don't know if you're going to have that part recorded, but you can find me on my personal Instagram at swagmasterboxtop5000. It's a mouthful, but I love it, okay? So that is swagmasterboxtop5000. So Swag Master Box Top 5000. There's a whole story behind that Instagram name. I could go in for another hour and a half. And then you can also, for all things BTS and information in regards to Smoke Breaks, you could go on the Smoke Breaks Film Instagram, just at Smoke Breaks Film, and follow for more.
And with that being said, all right, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. We love you so much. Stay tuned for the Smoke Break 2 and this podcast episode 2. Danny, you're watching this. You better make sure you free up the schedule to be on that project.
Oh my God, Danny, please make this a little podcast threesome next time.
What? Huh?
Podcasting threesome.
Yes.
podcasting.
I'll kick your ass if you don't show up.
Yes, he's gonna show up for sure.
Still gotta kick his ass. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this episode. And as always, stay tuned for the next one. And that is it.
That's a wrap.